Good day, students. So for today's online discussion, we will discuss about integration in our last topic in our fourth quarter module. So at the end of our lesson, our learning objectives, the first objectives that we have is to identify issues related to political engagement and youth empowerment. Determine programs that addresses issues related to political engagement and youth empowerment. Then we have to assess an existing programs that addresses an issue related to political engagement and youth empowerment. And lastly, to conduct a research for a draft proposal on a project on political engagement and youth empowerment. So in integration, we have the application on politics. So politics is the art of power play, but as a science, it allows a certain rules of engagement wherein the players are bound to observe in consonance with the standards set forth for the purpose with the end in view of establishing a just and humane society, which can only be possible with a graft and corruption-free government. So hence the study of political science must be geared towards empowering the youth with the proper concept of politics as a means to establish a clean government with an honest and ideal public servants, along with democratic principles of governance. So the youth shall be encouraged to participate actively in every political exercises within the campus as a training ground for their responsible and useful participation for the local and national political affairs of our country. Next, let's proceed to the application of different political ideologies. So, learning different political ideologies and understanding the same shall empower the youth with the proper knowledge on the subject and therefore enable them to participate or to appreciate and to choose the kind of political ideology which the Filipino people must adopt in their quest for a better government with a philosophical foundation. So, political ideology is a must for every society to adopt, as it serves as the basis of every political act, individually or collectively. So indeed, it is even used as a yardstick of judging as to whether a certain political system is right or wrong. So in addition to this, moreover, the kind of government and also the economic system to be adopted in a given society largely depends on the ideology to be adopted in a given society. It is a must that the Filipinos, especially the youth as a sector, shall be acquainted with the said political ideology. So upon given the circumstances prevailing at the time, it is safe to assume that the best political ideology for the Philippine people to adopt with the aim especially of empowering the youth shall be democratic socialism. The reason is for the government to get control of the basic and vital industries, but at the same time giving them a limited democratic space. Next, we have the power and their uses or application. So politics in its practical sense is a power game. Understanding it shall be enable, especially the youth, to use and apply the same with responsibility, and therefore in a more useful and advantageous to the general public as their beneficiaries. So likewise, understanding the dimension, nature, types, and the consequence of power shall enable especially the youth to understand that power game is nonetheless governed by the rules of engagement, wherein the players are duty bound to observe. So, here's the politics contrary to Machiavellian theory is not without morality. Politics should be guided with morality because the players, being the politicians, are people who ought to be moralistic. Since morality is the foundation of what ought to be right under given circumstances, politicians as leaders are duty bound only to do what is right under a given situation. Next, we have the state, nation, and globalization. So, students must be acquainted with the concept of state, nation, and globalization. The reason is that these concepts are very common, aside from the fact that they are basic terms in political science and in governance. So, the students must have the ability to distinguish the state from nation, as the two terms are commonly used interchangeably, but in reality, there are two different terms in politics with distinct and separate meanings. So his students should know how to use properly both terms in relation to the subject, the state being a political concept while nation is ethnical. Thus, the state as to citizenry and nation as to nationality. So the elements of the state are people, territory, government, and sovereignty, while that of nation are commonalities such as common culture, history, language, religion, and etc. So in terms of globalization, nowadays has become a common byword. With the advent of modern and sophisticated technology, which made the world as one community and reference to all aspects of human race. We are one regardless of race, creed, and political beliefs. So we are one living in one community regardless of territorial boundaries. And we are one also in our quest for common endeavor for advancement of humanity in both the political and economic aspects of our lives through the unlimited horizon of opportunities or chances brought about by the ever-improving means of science and technology, especially in the field of communication. Next, we have the integration in historical background of Philippine democracy. So the historical background of Filipino people and the evolution of Philippine democracy and governance somehow explain the kind of people we are and the way we look at things from political and economic point of view in relation to the actual status with almost similar experiences. So ours is unique in the sense that we had the longest foreign domination from Spain and even now from the United States through the American-oriented educational system. No doubt that the Filipinos could be expected to have been alienated from themselves in reference to their native nature and characteristics as once upon a time an independent country and people with a distinct identity. So as one author once said, the Filipino people had lost their national identity and tried to become what they could not be could not be the brown Americans. So this colonial mentality is still manifest by the Filipino people's desire to work abroad and settle there for good together with their families, especially in the United States. So, in addition to this, however, there are a number of Filipinos who are also staying at home with advocacy to improve the plight of their people, especially now with inconvenient President Rodrigo R. Duterte, who appears projecting an independent foreign policy away from US or from United States. So this is a welcome development in our foreign policy as it gears toward the independence from the United States of America and at the same time opening a new horizon of economic brotherhood with our Asian brothers. So our youth must understand that it is time for them to stand by their own feet in terms of having an independent economic policy by way of developing our own natural resources with emphasis on agro-industrial economy. So being confined as much as possible to the Filipino nationals, and that should be foreign investment be necessary for capitalization. So the same must be anchored on equal partnership. So moreover, the youth must establish a common national identity for themselves to be proudly identified with, or if need be worth dying for. Next, we have the evolution of Philippine politics and governance. So the evolution of Philippine politics governance is the story of Filipino struggle for independence and self-governance from foreign domination, such as from Spain, the United States of America, and the Japanese. While the same may be the story of fame and glory of Filipino bravery and heroism, they were nevertheless marred with self-aggrandizement, vainglory, and worse, even with treachery. So an example was that Andres Bonifacio and his brother Procopio were killed at the hands of Emilio Aguinaldo's soldier. Likewise, Antonio Luna was assassinated, no less by the revolutionary soldiers also. So the hero of Tirad Pass, Gregorio del Pilar, then the brave and young general died because a Filipino by the name of Juanario Galot pointed to the American soldiers who were surprised at the back. Aguinaldo himself was betrayed by the Pakabebe scouts also. In fact, the Katipunan was discovered because one Teodora Pateño had confessed it to from Mariano Hill. So these dirty games of Filipino politics are still played with the same degree of self-aggrandizement, vainglory, and treachery, but with more cunning by the modern politicians. As today, at the Philippine political arena, such as the Congress through its various committee hearings under the guide of an investigation in aid of legislation, so with a congressional immunity. So therefore, the Filipino youth in this respect must manifest with such degree of adherence as to make said politicians know it is time for us to learn from our history that we need to work together and cooperate with one another, setting aside our self-interest for good of the country, with a new political culture under enlightened political atmosphere. So this can be done systematically and with more efficiency, through and with the use of social media network. Next, we have the executive. So the role of president, being the chief executive of lands, is quite important, not to say vast and encompassing. The president, under his though called residual power, is practically very powerful in that he may exercise such power as may not even provided by law, provided that he deems it necessary for effective performance of his office, and provided further that he is not prohibited by any law to exercise it. So the president with his father figure may do a lot of things with the use of his presidential powers and prerogatives, provided however that he has the genuine concerns for the Filipino people in general instead of serving his personal interests and that of his cronies. So thus the Filipino youth can do so much with regards to the choice of who would be the president to lead the country towards making of the same a heavenly place for the Filipino people to live in. So the election of the incumbent President Rodrigo Duterte in May 9, 2016 election appears to be an assertion, especially by the youth, to install whom they believe could lead the country into a drug-free or drugs-free and less corrupt government. The reason for the said conclusion is based on the fact that President Duterte's campaign was to clean the society from drugs and also to clean up the government from corruption. So surprisingly, he won with more than 16 million votes, even if he was not the popular as that of his rivals, and he had no political machineries as his opponents. Next, we have the legislative branch. So the Philippine Congress, with its bicameral features being composed of the Senate and the House of Representatives, is more disadvantageous than being effective and economical. It is not effective because legislation has become time-consuming, since any law passed by Congress must be approved by both chambers in an identical version. So a lot of consultations are required just to come up with the same version. So what made it hard is that fact that both chambers are independent from another, or one cannot dictate the other. So the members of both chambers, at least the majority of them, must necessarily come up with a compromise version of every proposed legislation. So failing to do so, no law, however urgent, can be enacted. So moreover, the enactment into law of any proposed legislation is also very much expensive in terms of the application of public hearings to be conducted by both chambers, with the respective expenses, which could have reduced to 50% or 50% as to time and money should there be only one legislative body. So likewise, the possibility of many bills going to trash upon failure of both chambers to pass a compromise version could also be eliminated. So therefore, the youth must actively participate the shifting from bicameral towards a unicameral legislator for more effective and economical reason. Next, we have the local government. So the decentralization of administrative power through devolution is the source of strength of local government units or LGUs. So the reason is that the power of governance, which had been traditionally exercised by the central government, which in effect rendered the LGUs helpless, has now been to a large degree delegated to the said LGUs for their full exercise and utilization to the advantage and benefits of their respective constituents. So the devolution of such governmental power is more practical and made by LGUs more responsive to the needs and of the government. Since the LGUs have the direct touch contact with the people so that the delivery of basic service can readily and speedily be made available. So moreover, the LGUs know what really are the actual needs of the people in a certain locality and able to immediately respond to those needs. So the youth must be acquainted personally with their respective local governments, especially the barangay, and try to help them in whatever where such help is necessary. So in fact, this is the youth's actual participation in the government of his residence and consequently with the municipality or city's concern as to the mother unit of the said barangay. Next, we have the state-society interaction. So the state-society interaction is through the citizens' participation in every political exercise which is held periodically every 3 years. This is the primary participation of every citizen because it is his personal choice as to who will manage the affairs of the state. So non-participation means not only neglect of duty but a manifestation of indifference and or lack of concern for the betterment of our country. This is a selfishness of the highest degree, since a manifestation also of no concern towards his fellow men. So the political participation likewise serves as the means of enlightening the public through the exchange of public opinion in the free market of ideas in terms of political parties, presentation of their respective platform of governance during the campaign period. So the importance of this political motivated endeavor is the fact that being a platform of governance for the incoming administration, most of the subjects are relevant as to the time and concern, the most recent development of the society concern, and most importantly deal with what should be the best for them, given the actual circumstances of the moment. So therefore, it must be for the youth to actively participate the periodic political exercises and also for them to subscribe the recent political development of the country. Next, we have the civil society and social movements. So the civil society, which is constituted of various non-government organizations, serves as the means for social movements in a given society at a given point in time. Although said non-government organization do not directly participate in the actual management of the government, they nevertheless influence the formulation of government policies. So as they serve as pressure groups applying pressures upon the government for the latter to adopt measures which directly promote their specific interests and generally advance their interests of the general public. So these multifarious activities of the people's organization through private in character yet have great influence upon the government since the latter cannot ignore the legitimate demands of the people. So the importance of this politically motivated endeavor, moreover, has the various activities aimed at promoting their members' interests in effect constitute the promotion of people in general and therefore the promotion of the state, since the latter is composed of the same people themselves. So thus it is the state policy to encourage and support people's organizations and non-government organizations. So indeed, they are even given due representation in the international or local development. Councils and other government agencies, as well as the youth, are thereby required to participate actively in the formation, management, and different activities of people's organization and non-government organization. Next, we have the citizens in practice. So the citizens are those considered members of political community called the state. Hence, the citizenship is a political concept. It is distinguished from nationality in that the latter is an affiliation to a nation by reason of commonalities such as, for example, those common culture, language, history, religion, and etc. Thus, nationality is an ethnical concept. So the nationality is more of emotional and psychological attachment of belongingness to one's race. So the importance of citizenship implies an obligation for the allegiance towards the state, and in return oblige the latter to render not only protection for the latter but also assistance and basic service under all circumstances wherever he is. Next, let's proceed to the common concept. So the concept of integration tells us the study of politics is no less than the story of man's struggle for the betterment of his life at the beginning, alone by himself, and later along with others, and still lately with different countries together under the global system of economy. So the pressing question remains as to which comes first, the economic or political system of given society. Otherwise stated, the question is which is the cause and effect. We submit that man by nature is an economic being, as he cannot live without his basic biological needs having been provided for. So this is his primary concern. The rest are but an offshoot of such needs. So the secondary in character in that sense, and to such extent, the economic needs must dictate the kind of political system to be adopted in a given society. So in addition to this, in the country where the majority of people live in the direct poverty, capitalism is a course, since it creates an economic environment where the rich becomes richer and the poor becomes poorer. Thereby, a democratic system of governance is not as well conducive for the purpose. What we need is a government that controls the ownership and distribution of at least the basic needs, with the end in view of assuring that even the poorest of the poor got their shares of the economic pie. We can't and we ought not to depend upon the mere kindness of philanthropic act of the rich and to make the poor live. So the government must be powerful enough and ought to have a political will to intervene in economic activities of the people. So this can be made possibly only by adopting an ideology of democratic socialism with a form of government that is socialist democrat.